Richard and Antonio's dilemma. Did he really think this through? Richard and Antonio have recently met in a college class, and they are getting to know each other. It is a core curriculum class for the university, so there are people with all different types of majors and goals taking part in the course. Richard and Antonio sit next to each other in the class some days, but they also have other friends that take the class, so they sometimes sit next to them instead. Because of this, they don't get to talk about some of the deeper questions that you get to ask your closest friends. Richard is a civil engineering major, and Antonio is an aerospace engineering major. One day, Richard and Antonio sit next to each other in class and start discussing the homework from the previous night. Richard finds out that Antonio did better on the homework than he did. Richard proceeds to say, "Wow, you're really smart. What is your major anyway?" Antonio tells Richard that he is an aerospace engineering major, and Richard says, "That's awesome. I didn't expect someone like you to have that kind of goal."
While Richard probably didn't think much of it at that time, Antonio, who is of Hispanic descent, felt belittled and hurt. He has always been worried about not fitting in, and it is hard when he gets a reminder such as one Richard gave him. Richard thinks that everything is still normal, but in reality, his friendship with Antonio is hurt because of microaggression that was spoken. Richard did not take a minute to consider how it would affect his friend. Leadership emerges. Marcus, having recalled information from the Mind Over Matter article he read last night, thought deeply about the principles of reappraisal and bystander intervention that he had learned. He pondered the aspects of the article that centered around approaching the situation and how to correctly and respectfully insert himself in the conversation using the triangle model. From the night before, it was clear in the evidence from the research that he had read that reappraising initial responses and emotions is an incredible tactic for coping with and handling in stressful situations. Although his first initial response was an arousal response boosted by adrenaline, stress hormones, and overall elation, he refocused himself and his thoughts to aid the two friends in their conversation and approached resolution in a civilized, respectful way.
Marcus remembered readings from the Mind Over Matter article and the triangle model, so he knew to come across as non-assuming to both parties and simply gave his opinion and understanding of the comment he heard. Something else Marcus knew to be vital to the situation is that he should not attack or demoralize the character of Richard, because he does not know Richard's heart and intentions with this comment. He wants to believe in the good of Richard and his intentions and make sure his motive to intervene are non-threatening and primarily focused on the resolution of the conflict. He only had moments to act and respond to the microaggressions utilizing the PSYC social BPS model as a resource for social benefit and remembering the methods of coping with stress and challenging situations. He knew that learning to adapt to these kinds of situations involving a source, recipient, and a bystander would mold him into a person capable of reading a situation and acting with courage, confidence, and correct usability of the biopsychosocial model and other resources necessary for resolving conflict.
After calming down, Marcus, who is also a varsity basketball player for the school, decided to help out as well. Marcus also read on an article on how bystanders can shut down microaggressions in his psychology class. In the article, he read that when someone from a dominant identity group intervenes, they're perceived as more knowledgeable, more persuasive, and less biased than if he had the exact same comment made by a member of a marginalized group. Knowing that Marcus was a popular kid in class with high social standing, he decided to take it upon himself to prevent Richard and Antonio from having a potential misunderstanding that could ruin their friendship. Not knowing Richard's true intentions behind his comments, and knowing Antonio was feeling hurt by these words, Marcus decided that he was going to help Richard express his true intentions behind his words. To Antonio.
Marcus began by asking Richard if he meant any harm by saying, "I didn't expect someone like you to have that kind of goal," to Antonio. Richard, who realizes that he may have come across as racist, starts to explain that the comments were just a joke and he does not bear any ill feelings towards Antonio and apologizes for any pain he may have caused. After listening to Richard's apology, Antonio understands that Richard meant no harm and explains to Richard that he was having a hard time adjusting to the class, which is the reason he thought that Richard was being racist. After Marcus helped them talk to each other, the friendship between Richard and Antonio grew even stronger, with now each of them understanding the other much better than before.
The conclusion is overall, Marcus stepped in and took a leadership position and helped heal the situation. Richard did not mean to hurt Antonio's feelings, but he did, and if it had not been for Marcus stepping in, their friendship may have not ever fully been the same. It is important to educate yourself on these topics because they can and will happen in everyday life. People can be offended even if you are not meaning to offend them. And it is important to learn how to diffuse the situation and make sure no one ends up with hurt feelings or grudges. Learning how to deal with microaggressions is an important skill wherever you are in life, as it can help save important relationships and acquaintances.